Hello everyone, I'm Nina Siniakova, and this is a show between us where we explore creative world of modern artists, composers, performers, dancers, choreographers. Our first guest is Philadelphian pianist and composer Sumi Tonooka. Welcome, Sumi.
Thank you, Nina. Nice to be here.
Nice to see you here. I believe Sumi and I met for the first time about 6 years ago, was
That's
it?
right.
And ever since, hopefully mutually, we take interest in each other's work. I do.
Of course, absolutely. I loved your last piece. That wonderful piano chamber piece was great.
So, thank you. Sumi is referring to my relatively recent release of Frozen Reflections.
Yes, I love that.
Did I introduce you the right way? Is it like pianist composer or composer pianist?
You know, it's kind of depending on what's going on at a certain period of time. Sometimes I'm more focused on piano than composition, and the other way around.
So who are you right now in the first place?
Right this moment, I would say composer pianist.
Because?
Just because of the amount of composing I'm doing as opposed to more playing. Right now I'm more compositionally focused.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just I'm happy to be busy writing. It feels good actually. Yeah.
I agree. When I don't write, I always think my life is wasted.
Yeah, I mean, I've been composing all my life, and but this lately, recently, as of maybe 10 years ago, I started composing for orchestra, and that's been a new sort of a new thing that I didn't see coming. That's kind of landed, and now I'm sort of I would say smitten.
Smitten is a good word.
Yeah.
Still, let me get a little bit back.
Yeah,
and
sure.
You and jazz.
Okay.
Do you remember the moment where you were a girl and there was a revelation and you thought, that's what I want to do? What was that?
I was a big Thelonious Monk fan. My mother played a lot of Monk's music in the house when I was growing up, recordings of his music. So when I was little, very little, like 8, 9, I used to just laugh when I heard his music. I would laugh out loud, and his music tickled my funny bone. It was like, it really made me, I felt a sense of humor in his music, aside from the joy of music making in his music. And he's a kind of he has his own very particular way of playing and a very particular sound that he gets out of the instrument. And I found it like very funny.
I think I remember this story, but
right,
please go on.
At the Aqua Lounge in West Philadelphia, which was this was a club that a lot of live jazz was recorded. A lot of great jazz music was there and recorded over a period of years. And it was sort of the tail end of the Philadelphia Jazz Renaissance on 52nd Street. There used to be lots of clubs and all kinds of music happening, and so it was kind of that phasing out period. But I was young enough to capture, be able to experience some of that. Mm-hmm. And so I remember my parents took me to see him, and it was an off night, because he didn't really play too much the first 2 sets. And I remember just worrying, like, oh no, is he not going to play? Because I think he was going through something, some kind of, he was in a phase of not being like where he really felt like playing a lot. But the last set, he came out, it was totally worth waiting for, and he played by himself, solo piano, Round Midnight, which is, for classic jazz composition of his, beautiful composition. And it kind of did me in for the rest of my life. I just was like, after I heard that, I just knew I wanted to be a jazz pianist.
Did you play piano before?
Yes, I was playing.
And
then.
what style did you play?
I mean, I came up playing a lot of things, making up music, and then when I was about 8 or 9, I took my first piano lessons at Settlement Music School in
Which
Philadelphia.
branch?
The Queen Street branch.
Okay.
Yeah, so
The
I used
one.
to go down there with my sister, and we would take we had to take a trolley to a train to a trolley to get there from West Philadelphia. And we were very, we were little at those days. I guess it was cool for kids to travel by themselves.
True.
But, we
absolutely.
we just did that, and so those were my beginnings at Settlement Music School. And I studied theory, and I was taking drama and dance, and I was taking a piano with a very strict sort of the Sinberg sisters, Esther Sinberg and Lillian. Was it Esther and Lillian? Yeah, they had their rooms right next to each other, and they were like old school, really strict teachers. The first lesson, I came out in tears. And I remember because my friend who studied with her was waiting for me outside in the hallway, and she's like, "What's wrong? Like, what happened?" And I was like, "I'm allergic to something. I'm allergic to something."
to music.
She was like so strict because I was not really reading music then, and she caught it in the first lesson. She's like, "You can't do that. You can't do that." And what I was doing was I was sort of faking it. I was kind of like, kind of, sort of, what? I don't know. Could you play it for me? Because my teacher before that would play this stuff for me, and then I'd hear it, and I would just be able to kind of figure it out.
But hey, you kept playing till you heard Thelonious Monk, so it wasn't as bad after all. What happened between those 8 and 13 years old? Something kept you going.
Oh yeah, no, I really love music. I enjoyed playing Bach, and I enjoyed, I just enjoyed playing the piano. I would sit at the piano and make things up from the time I was really little. So I would sit at the piano and play, not just play the piano. I mean, I'd be playing like kids play, And I'd get my friends to sit at the piano, and we'd tell stories and make up music as we were telling stories, and
here acting comes handy.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah.
Super. So the jazz was a part of your life just as the daily listening, but not as the actual playing, or you kind of started to incorporate those elements you had in the recordings in your playing just by listening to them?
Well, I was doing a little bit of both. Yeah. I mean, I was one thing that I'm very grateful to my mother, because she took me to hear a lot of live jazz as a kid. So they took me to hear Thelonious Monk. That's not the only person I heard. I heard lots of jazz when I was a kid. So we would do that as a sort of form of entertainment, just go out and listen to music. So I was seriously listening as a child to live music. And I think that makes a big difference. When you're in the audience and it's jazz and that's happening and you're part of the happening, because jazz is the music of the moment, you feel it in a different way, I think. So a lot of time with my students, I always try to get them to really go out and listen to the music, because without that, you're kind of missing something, And I really am grateful for the amount of music I heard. I mean, there were many incredible jazz musicians coming through Philadelphia. And my mother didn't just take us to jazz, she took us to the Philadelphia Orchestra. So one of my early epiphanies, aside from hearing Monk the first time, was listening to Andre Segovia at the Academy of Music.
Okay.
And I remember sitting all the way up in the peanut gallery, because you'd buy those $5 tickets with the little binoculars, and the stage looked so small. And I remember seeing Andre Segovia walk out on stage, and there's this tiny little stool, and there's this tiny little man with this tiny little guitar. And I was like, what is he going to, I'm a little kid, like I'm 9 years old or something. And I'm like, what is he going to do? Like, what is this, And then he sat down, and I think it was an all-Spanish flamenco program or something. And I just remember from the first strike of the guitar, just going, like that. And then just being in bliss, or but that feeling of complete surrender to the sound. Exactly. Yeah. And I was a child, but I'll never forget that. Just being swept away by the sound. And So I'm also grateful to her because she just, and it wasn't just music. She would take us to the art museums and we'd go to hear shows. And we were, I mean, it's not like she was rich either. I mean, we lived on a secretary salary practically. And, you know, I'm amazed at what she was actually able to expose us to, considering that my parents didn't make a lot of money. We were working class, you know. So that I'm really, really glad that uh, I had that exposure when I was young. I think it made a big difference.
Absolutely, I so much agree, and I wish modern generation had a little bit of that what you used to have.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you look at all the years from that moment of Segovia and Thelonious Monk until now, so there are certain milestones of impressions that completely change us, and this opening into a different direction happens. What were the moments? Who did you hear? What were the events in musical sense, purely in a musical sense, that something turned your mind upside down? There should be a couple. What were those?
Well, I would say that one of the things I had that I'm super grateful for is I had real exposure to some of the history of the music as it was happening to the people that were actually doing it. So I had some amazing teachers. I studied with Mary Lou Williams. She was one of my teachers. I studied with Bernard Piefair.
Where did you study? What was the university?
Well, this was privately.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of my intense studying was done privately. So I also left home at a very young age. I was about 15, 16 when I left home. I had gotten my high school diploma very young and went to Boston to study music. And I studied with Madame Shaloff, who taught this very special technique. She worked at the Conservatory of Music, and she also put me together with a great jazz pianist pedagogue by the name of Charles Banakis. So I was like 15 years old getting, direct lessons from them. Stanley Cowell was another one of my, so great pianists. I mean, these are people that are really, they in the Parthenon of history of music making, So for instance, going to hear Bernard at his home, he used to live in Chestnut Hill. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, I do.
You do, yeah. And just hearing him play and being a young person and just not even quite understanding what he was doing, because he kind of played to his own use, He was an amazing improviser with a huge technique and a true virtuoso of the piano. And so when you're exposed to that live, it's kind of like you don't forget those things, And I remember Bernard saying to me as a very young person, you're competing with Oscar Peterson and Keith Jarrett. And I remember looking like over my shoulder, like, is he talking to me? You know what I mean? It's
Yes,
like,
I do.
but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he kind of set the bar really high for me, to even for me to even think that I could possibly one day, at least try to be in the same, stream of that. Most recently, I would say the whole thing with the orchestral thing has happened fairly late in my life. I didn't really see it coming. There was a special program for jazz composers called the Jazz Composers Orchestra Intensive that was a part of UCLA, Columbia University, Herb Alpert School of Music, Doris Duke. They all got together to try to bring more jazz musicians into the field of composing for orchestra. And they put together this whole program. You were working with a mentor composer the whole time you were there, and then they gave you the option after the week was over, and it was a very much an actual intensive, that if you wanted to go further, you could submit like a sample, an orchestral sample, and there were like orchestras waiting in the wings to play your work, but it was another part of the thing, and it was a competition, right? So I was like, whatever. And I went home, I remember, and I had this dream of trying to orchestrate the curve in the I Ching symbol. And I woke up thinking, what a weird dream, and like laughing to myself, like how, what? And then the dream sort of stayed with me, and I remember thinking, I wonder what that would actually sound like. You know, what would I do with that? So I applied with the 1 minute, you know, idea, orchestrated, and sent them a letter about the dream, and I got it, you know. And so I worked for a whole year on that piece, and the American Composers Orchestra, and that's kind of the one that kind of, you know, it got me thinking, well, maybe this is something I can actually explore, because once I started, once I kind of got that little taste of what that might, you know, sound or feel like, I felt like, something about it was
appealing.
Yes.
Attractive. Between the two worlds, and for me, because I have to switch between two worlds of music, language, just as well, what do you find inspiring in jazz that you can apply in classical composition and vice versa? How does this work?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Nina, because I don't know. I mean, the whole term classical,
Yeah.
You know, I have some issue with that. And also jazz, too, the term jazz. I think when you codify music, it can mean so many different things to different people. And then what the truth is within that, like in terms of, well, what classical music actually is and what jazz actually is. Of course, there is the truth of what it is, which is that jazz is a music that came about through, you know, slavery, basically.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, that's where the roots of it are. And it is that the sound of kind of freedom songs, you know, work songs, and the whole sort of spiritual, what do you call it, residue of that being the roots of the music is something very profound, and it's very American. It comes out of a very American, you know, place, time, events, you know, people, and so that's something very particular to the music, and classical music, more or less, has a lot of European roots, you know, and but that being said, I think what's happening now in terms of the time that we're living in, there's already been so much revolution, right, within the music in terms of when it began and where it is now and all the things that have happened in between, even for, you know, that now the umbrella of like what that means musically and sonically is much wider than it used to be. Do you know what I mean? And so you can be inspired by just one facet of jazz or one facet of classical music, or, you know, and I think that what's happening now, particularly with the orchestras, because what they told us when we were there, they said to us, listen, you're here for a reason. We chose you because we want you to really start thinking seriously about composing for orchestra. The orchestral world really needs new voices, and we feel like your voices are as crucial, if not more crucial, at this point in time to enter into the stream of this path, right? And I remember thinking, really? You know, I was like, kind of like, really, is that true? And I think that there, to some extent, you could lean on either side and find, no, it's not, or yes, it is. You know what I mean? Like, it really kind of depends on. But I think that in general, there's an opening. Like there's an opening in terms of like we want something different or new or something else to come into the path. And so, but within that, of course, you know, your mind sometimes overtakes, or there's things that can happen in terms of like doubts, or you know, just what artists go through in
Absolutely.
terms of like putting your stuff out there and what you're up against, you know.
Right.
But I think that the decision to make art, the decision to be an artist, is something that is very. It's not like something you can get. You don't get extremely intellectual about it. It's like you're doing this because you have a calling. You know what I mean? You wouldn't be doing it otherwise. There's something that is pulling you, you know, and I do think that part of the, I don't want to say the answer because but part of what it takes is that commitment to stay.
And that's the hardest thing.
Yes, it really is. And because life happens, you know, and then within life, it's not all, and I think anybody who's a great artist has to live life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really, if you don't have real experiences to draw from, you know what I mean, that gives you less to like express. Yes, mm-hmm. And I think that most artists want challenges.
Absolutely.
You know,
it's boring otherwise.
Yeah, right. You want challenges. You want new things.
To connect the two worlds of classical and jazz, wouldn't you say that Alchemy Project is the one that does exactly the connection of two worlds?
Yes, in the sense that we're all improvisers and we're all band leaders and composers, and we write specifically to be able to produce, perform, and learn our own music, and that it's a melding between jazz and classical. Classical mm-hmm. only in the sense that there's a lot of through composed material, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm.
In this group, so Alchemy Project includes
Erica Lindsay on tenor saxophone, mm-hmm. Samantha Boshnak on trumpet, Celine Washington on tenor and multi-instrumentalist, so he plays bass clarinet and oboe and alto flute as well as tenor. David Aaron.
I have seen only 3 records. Right. Are there more?
Right. No. There's only 3 right now. We've got 2 coming out because both Eric and I got the won the Chamber of Music America's New Jazz Works grant. So we have those to do.
So percentage of jazz and classical musicians in this, how is it distributed?
Well, everyone has written for orchestra or has done some of that type of writing.
Okay.
And also we've all played with our own bands, but we've also played in a lot of other like different types of music bands, you know, use reading a lot. So people have different strengths and different things that they do.
So it was already a mix at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just curious. So fine, you have this core of 5 musicians with very, very different backgrounds. And when you get together to a rehearsal, how is it happening? How do you tell each other who is doing what, or you still approach it like by jazz standards? You guys know how it works, or are you allowed to tell, hey, you know, this piano sounds better in your piece, you should do this and that? What is the process?
I like that question because it's not cut and dry like that, and we have run into issues in and around because we're very democratic in how we do things. So at one point, you know, there were certain pressures because David Aaron, who was the bassist, was the producer as well. So that gave him a certain, you know, different role within the and then there was like, all of us have we're all different ages and we all have different ethnicities and we're all sort of focusing on different things at different times. But we're learning a lot, Nina, because it's not an easy thing in terms of those questions you ask. So we all know that we're all going to do at least one each of our pieces when we get together.
Forgive me, just to cover. So every CD features at least one or maybe two tracks of every composer who is a part of the group.
Yes, exactly. And all of us are so different as composers.
Oh gosh,
very
wild variety.
Really different, right. And so that's part of the strength of it. And then we're all bringing something different to it, and everybody's got different strengths too, and weaknesses. You know, that's just what it is to be human.
Just wanted to add, it's very easy to hear if you just listen to all tracks. And I listened to all 3 albums. It reminded me of a hedgehog, but in a good way. It's so wild and bursting that you kind of get into it, and you're looking for more of that stuff. Absolutely.
Well, that's amazing that you listened to all 3 records.
Yeah, I did.
Wow,
So I'm a nerd.
Oh no, I'm impressed.
I did study.
I listened to yours. I know that, but you listened to all 3 Alchemy Sound Project records. That's amazing. Thank you. That's so cool. That's so great.
So in any event,
I guess people are talking about it because it is unusual in that sense. You know, it's very democratic in the way that we're running it, and everybody's got different strengths, and we're all our own band leaders anyway. You know what I mean? We all lead our own bands and write for our own bands and stuff like that. But and now we're in this group where we're committed to each other, and over time it's been, you know, we had that 3rd record. 2 of the records got on to Downbeat's whatever best of the year, whatever. You know, and I think in any group of people working together, it's always something that comes up and out, you know, because we're just people. And I would say though that working together is satisfying, but it's also really challenging, you know, keeping the same band together, especially if it's a group of composers, you know.
Tell me about it. Nothing is worse.
Right? It's like, oh my goodness. But I mean, there's a lot to be learned though, too. And what I like about it is that we can really see how we're all growing over a period of time or changing, you know, and that we can learn from each other's strengths. So
you and Philadelphia, what is the connection there? How attached are you to the spirit of the city? How the city impacted your personality and your music?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm really proud to be from Philly. Philadelphia has something here. I don't know quite what it is. Sometimes I joke with my students or like the musicians that I know, and I'm like, it's got to be in the water, you know, like something you're drinking or something, because the amount of rhythm section players that come out of here, like drummers and bass players, it's astounding. Especially the drummers that come out of the city. It's like, how is that happening? And I've seen it happen over a period of generations, you know, where it's like each generation. And somehow the jazz musicians here just keep coming up and coming out. And it's like, I don't know what it is about this place that makes that true, but it's definitely true. And I know that because I've lived away from Philly now and have come back. You know what I mean? And I didn't realize when I left some of the things that Philly has, that it's a very unique to Philadelphia. You know what I mean? Philly is a very gritty city, you know, but it's also full of culture. It's also, and it can be provincial. Like there's some old-fashionedness to this city, because I guess it's as old as it is Betsy Ross and the Liberty Bell and all that kind of stuff. And but the folks that are here, the people that are here, the vitality, and there's something about the communities here that are really very rich and culturally rich, even though a lot of times it's not the easiest place, you know. I think it has some things that are special about it, and that it's sandwiched between New York and Baltimore and Washington. So in terms of the Northeast corridor, it sits in a very sort of unique place as far as geographically. So people-wise, it's very interesting, the people that come through this town and what we're exposed to here. I do think that there's a lot of vitality, a lot of richness, a lot of energy, you know, and I've seen that over a course of years, coming back and forth. Even after I left Philadelphia, I would come back to teach, or I'd come back to play, and I would notice, these things. And now that I'm back sort of living here after not having lived here for a good 30 something years, if not longer, um, I'm revisiting, a lot of those things, like what Philly means to me and all that. So it's hard for me to like really put my finger on exactly what it is about Philly that I'm holding or carrying, but I do have a certain amount of history that I hold as a result of learning how to play jazz here. Like for instance, my first professional gig was with this great drummer, Philly Joe Jones, who kind of took me under his wing for, my very young years. And I've learned jazz in a very authentic way. I don't feel like I get to play enough. Like right now, I'm really thinking I want to get back to performing more and playing more than I have been. I have been very much focused on the compositional thing. So I've spent so many years at the piano that I really want to be getting back to be playing more seriously at the piano. Not that I haven't been doing any performing, but I feel like I want to start to actually really address that more now,
But it's a common thing, and I read it even about Rachmaninoff or Doslavsky. So you either compose or you perform, and I feel it the same way. There's some kind of a center in your mind, in your soul, that can turn in either direction, but it's impossible to dedicate yourself to two activities at the same time. I cannot do it, and I think it's normal.
So how do you think of yourself? Because I hear you, and I hear a great pianist, someone who's been, you're a very strong pianist. I mean, you're a professional pianist, and then also when I listen to your compositions, I mean, you're holding so much. So how do you think of you?
I'm a composer pianist.
You think of yourself as composer?
Yes,
first?
absolutely, absolutely. This is the world where I'm very comfortable. As a pianist, I cannot play Tchaikovsky First Concerto, and I don't want to do it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I hear that. I hear that. No, I do.
What is it that you're looking forward to in the time yet to come? What is it that you're hoping for that will keep you going?
Well, I'd really like to be able to, like, one of the things I realize about classical music or through composed music, and I remember talking to a jazz composer who's very well known for his through composed music, Anthony Davis, who's a jazz piano. He teaches at UCLA, and his music is more, I would say, contemporary and in a particular way. But I remember him saying to me, this is many years ago, he was saying, well, I like it because, I don't want my music to be based off of what it is that I do at the piano so much as an improviser, because once I'm gone, that's it. But if I can write music where other people can experience it after I'm gone, it will live on its own as a thing, right? And that I remember when he first said that to me, I was like, this guy got some kind of ego trip or something. I didn't get it. You know what I mean?
We all do, definitely.
Of course we all do. Of course we all do. But I understand now what he means by that, and the sense that you're going to put all this time and energy into what it is that, and then to be able to leave something where people can come, and each time that they come to it, they can make something new happen, even though it's all written out for them. You know what I mean?
Of course.
They're bringing new energy in a new time, whatever. And then all those pieces that actually exist that people want to come back to and keep returning to live in a certain kind of way and way beyond you, right?
Yeah.
Right? I think great artists have that. They have that sort of thing. Like I think of an artist like John Coltrane, who is always striving, like always moving towards something, and it was always something that it was like pulling at him, and the amount of revolution that his music went through during his lifetime and how it affected the rest of the world and the other players, especially jazz, and styles of jazz, right? So I think part of what it is the journey of really being oneself, like true to oneself in a certain way, and that is it's a singular path.
Of course.
And so, yeah.
What's important is that you are still trying, you are still experimenting, and you are ready to take up upon any challenge, whatever might come to you. This is wonderful. Yeah. Sumi, thank you so much for
you're
coming.
Very welcome.
What a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, I would say keep keep swinging, keep going for it.
We don't have another choice.
I hear you. We're not so different, in that, in just the whole idea of piano and composition and, different worlds to some extent, but not really,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's cool to share the same world.
Yeah.
So. And so let me just thank everyone. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. We are going to have several fantastic guests, just as fascinating as Sumi, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Leave comments, leave your notes. Thank you so much for watching.
Where do we look? We look into
those
lens,
three things?
Those three things. Okay.
Smile, say cheese.
You're going to have to edit this part.
I guess I will.